The lake shimmered like glass that morning, reflecting the rows of white chairs my daughter had ordered without asking. I stood there in my own backyard, clutching a cup of cold coffee, and listened to the music crew test their speakers. 1, 2, 3, mic check. The sound echoed across the water, loud and hollow like the punchline of a cruel joke. I had bought this cabin to escape the noise of my life, and now it was being turned into a stage for a wedding I never agreed to host. If you're watching this, let me ask you something. What would you do if your own child treated your home, your sanctuary, like a rental hall? Would you smile and stay quiet, or would you fight back? Comment 1 if you'd stand up for yourself, or hit, like if you'd just walk away. Because I didn't walk away, not this time. 3 months ago, this place was nothing but peace. After 40 years of teaching high school literature, I finally had enough money and courage to live the dream I'd postponed for decades. A small cedar cabin overlooking Lake Roslyn, where mornings smelled like pine and evenings tasted like silence. I used to sit on the porch with tea and watch the mist rise off the water, thinking, this is what freedom sounds like. I'd promised myself no more grading papers at midnight, no more meetings, no more pretending to like people who drained me. Just me, the lake, and the slow return of my own heartbeat. The call came on a Thursday. "Mom, you'll be so happy," my daughter Emma chirped. "Ryan and I want to come stay for a few days. We've been so stressed with the wedding planning. Just a little getaway." Of course I said yes. I missed her. After my husband died, she'd become the only family I had left. When she arrived, her laughter filled the cabin, like sunlight, loud, familiar, comforting. For a moment I thought maybe this would be good for both of us. That illusion lasted exactly 12 hours. By sunrise the next morning, trucks were rolling down my driveway. Men in black shirts carried boxes of glassware, flowers, and lighting rigs. I opened the door in my robe and asked what they were doing. "Set up for the ceremony," one of them said, pointing at a clipboard. "Venue Lakeview Cabin. Authorized by." He squinted at the paper Margaret Walker. My name. My signature. Except I'd never signed anything. I ran inside and found Emma on the deck phone pressed to her ear, hair curled perfectly, giving instructions like a general. "Yes, the arch goes near the dock and make sure the bar's stocked by Friday," she said, turning to me with a bright smile. "Oh, good morning, Mom. Isn't this exciting?" I stared at her. "Exciting? You forged my name to rent my house for your wedding." Her smile faltered for a second before snapping back into place. "Mom, don't be dramatic. It's just for the weekend. You have the guest room upstairs. We'll clean everything up afterward." I looked around the tables, the tents, the strangers walking in and out of my kitchen. The smell of sawdust and perfume mixed in the air. "You didn't even ask," I whispered. "You just assumed I'd say yes." Emma rolled her eyes. "You live alone, Mom. You've got all this space. Why not share it? It's not like you're doing anything important out here." Those words hit harder than I expected. Not doing anything important. I wanted to tell her that peace was important, that after burying her father, paying off the house, and teaching other people's children for decades, I'd earned my stillness. But instead, I just nodded, too stunned to fight. The next hours blurred together. Strangers filled every room. They moved my furniture, cleared my bookshelves, and draped white linen over everything that made this cabin mine. My family photos disappeared from the mantel. Even the old rocking chair, my husband's chair, was carried out to make space for the cake display. The scent of roses and champagne filled the house, suffocating and artificial. Every polite smile from those wedding planners felt like a reminder I was a guest in my own home. That night, I couldn't sleep. From upstairs, I heard them laughing, music thumping, corks popping. The lake reflected their lights like fireflies mocking me. I sat by the window, remembering the day I first walked into this cabin. The real estate agent had said this place has soul. I'd smiled and said so do I. Now I wasn't sure either of us still did. When I confronted Emma again the next morning, she didn't even look up from her laptop. "Mom, please." We're in the middle of finalizing guest seating. Ryan's parents are flying in the florists on the way, and the photographer's coming for pre-shoots. "Can you just relax and let me handle this?" Relax. I wanted to scream, but something stopped me. a quiet, sharp voice inside that said, "Wait, watch. Let them think you're weak." I smiled instead. "Of course, dear. Whatever you need," she exhaled, relieved. "Thank you, Mom. You'll see it'll be beautiful." I turned toward the window where the workers were setting up a massive white tent, the kind used for celebrity galas. The reflection of my own face in the glass looked unfamiliar, calm, almost cold. That night I poured myself a glass of wine and stood by the dock watching the water ripple under the moonlight. Behind me, the house glowed with fairy lights, laughter, and music. I thought of every year I'd spent saving for this cabin, every late night. I'd corrected essays under fluorescent lights, every parent-teacher meeting where I'd smiled through exhaustion. This place was supposed to be my reward, and now it was their playground. I whispered to the lake, "They think they can take everything because I won't fight." The water didn't answer, but its silence felt like permission. A strange calm settled over me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just made a promise to myself, to the house, to the ghost of my husband, that by the time those wedding bells rang, no one would ever forget who this home truly belonged to. If you're still watching, tell me honestly, what would you have done in my place? Comment 1 if you'd stand your ground, like if you'd walk away, because when the music started and the guests arrived, I already knew exactly what I was going to do next, and it wasn't forgiveness. The morning after that sleepless night, the lake looked like a mirror, still perfect, almost mocking. From my kitchen window, I could see the sun bleeding gold across the water. It should have been peaceful, but all I could feel was the low throb of humiliation in my chest. My house, my peace, had become a construction site for someone else's happiness. I told myself to breathe, to keep calm, to act like everything was normal. But that illusion shattered the moment I walked into my own kitchen. A young man I'd never seen before was standing barefoot in front of my stove, flipping pancakes. "Oh, morning," he said cheerfully. "You must be the housekeeper. Mrs. Taylor said you'd help with breakfast." The word housekeeper lodged itself in my throat. "Mrs. Taylor," I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah," he said, turning a pancake with a grin. "The bride. She told us to make ourselves at home." The bride. My daughter. I didn't correct him. I just smiled faintly and said, "I see." I poured myself coffee, but the cup trembled in my hand. The bitter liquid burned my tongue, but I needed that sting to stay composed. As I turned to leave, I noticed something on the counter, a thick folder with a gold logo stamped on the cover. Rosalind Events Management. Under it, I caught a glimpse of my own name. I waited until the man left the kitchen humming, still believing I was some hired help. Then I opened the folder. Inside were printed contracts, floor plans, and invoices. Each page listed venue, the Lakeview cabin owner, Margaret Walker, my name, my signature, the signature I'd taught Emma to practice when she was a little girl and wanted to sign her homework neatly, the curve of the M, the long tail on the G. She'd always been proud of how perfectly she could copy it. I stared at that familiar loop and felt my stomach twist. I ran my fingers over the paper, feeling the indentation where the pen had pressed too hard. It wasn't mine. She'd forged it. My daughter had forged my name to rent out my home for her wedding, a house that I had bought with every penny of my retirement, every bonus, every night I stayed late at school. My entire life reduced to a venue rental on paper. I closed the folder carefully and set it back in the exact same place. My pulse hammered in my ears, but my face stayed calm. If there's one thing 30 years of teaching teenagers had taught me, it's how to keep a poker face while someone lies to you. I took another sip of coffee and looked out the window. Emma and Ryan were standing by the dock, laughing with the photographer posing for engagement shots. They looked radiant. They looked entitled. I wanted to storm out there to scream, "How dare you!" But something stopped me again, that same still, cold voice inside. It whispered, "Not yet. Let them dig their hole deeper." I went back to my room and pulled out my old laptop. The screen flickered to life slowly, the way old things do, when they still have fight left in them. I started searching through my emails, looking for any notice, any document that might have been sent to me. There it was, an unread email from a company I didn't recognize. Event Space Rentals. Confirmation of booking. My hands shook slightly as I opened it. Dear Miss Walker, thank you for allowing us to host the Taylor wedding celebration at your Lakeview cabin. We appreciate your timely payment of the $5,000 deposit and look forward to a successful event. Attached a PDF receipt showing my name, my address, and a signature that wasn't mine. A laugh escaped my lips, quiet, sharp, almost feral. They'd even paid the deposit under my name. The brazenness of it was staggering. I thought of all the lessons I'd given Emma about honesty, about integrity, about earning things rather than taking them. I remembered her as a child stealing candy from the kitchen and denying it, even with chocolate smeared on her cheek. I'd scolded her then, but gently thinking she'd grow out of it. Apparently she hadn't. She'd just traded candy for real estate. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma. "Mom, can you stay upstairs for a bit? The decorator's coming to measure for the aisle runner and it'll be easier without anyone walking around. Thanks, love you. Love you." The words looked foreign now, like part of a script she didn't mean. I typed back a single word, sure. Then I sat at my desk and stared at the wall for a long time. On the shelf above me sat an old photo, Emma at 8 years old, missing front teeth, holding up a drawing of a house. Our dream cabin she'd written in crayon. She'd drawn the two of us, holding hands by a lake. I used to keep that picture as a reminder of hope. Now it felt like prophecy. By afternoon, more trucks had arrived. Floral arrangements, catering equipment, champagne crates, all unloading in a neat assembly line. The entire property had become a production zone. I overheard one of the planners say the bride's mom is upstairs resting. She's fine with everything. I wanted to yell down that I wasn't fine, that none of this was okay. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I called the one person I trusted. "Liz, it's me," I said when my old colleague's voice answered. "You still practicing law part-time?" She laughed softly, only for friends who get into trouble. "What's going on?" I hesitated, glancing around to make sure no one was nearby. I think my daughter forged my signature on a property contract. There was a pause. Then her tone shifted, calm, professional, alert. "All right, don't panic. Don't confront her yet. Send me copies of everything. We'll find out what she did." That night, I scanned the papers and sent them to Liz. My fingers moved with eerie precision as though my body knew exactly what to do, even while my heart was breaking. Before bed, I looked out at the lake again. The moon was full, its light silvering the water. From downstairs came the faint echo of laughter. Emma's laughter, so carefree, so certain that she'd gotten away with everything. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not sadness, not even anger. Something cleaner, a decision. I whispered into the dark. "You want a perfect wedding, Emma. You'll get one, but you won't like the ending. If you're listening, tell me this. If your own child betrayed you, this way, would you confront them now or wait until the day they least expect it? Comment 1. If you'd strike back immediately or hit, like if you'd wait for the perfect moment, because I chose to wait, and that decision changed everything." The next morning, I woke to the sound of laughter echoing across the lake light, carefree and painfully unfamiliar, in a place that used to belong to silence. Through the window, I saw Emma and Ryan standing on the dock with two people I didn't recognize. They were pointing toward the cabin, gesturing animatedly like real estate agents showing off a property. My stomach tightened. I watched Emma flip her hair, that confident gesture she'd inherited from me, and say something that made the group laugh. I couldn't hear the words, but I recognized the tone, ownership. I pulled on my sweater and went downstairs quietly. The decorators were already there, hanging lights, rearranging furniture, talking about photo angles and guest flow. The air smelled like perfume and fresh paint, an artificial sweetness layered over what used to be cedar and coffee. "Excuse me," I said to a young woman taping cords along the floor. "Who told you to move that antique table?" She looked up startled. "Oh, Mrs. Taylor did. Said it was cluttering the shot. Mrs. Taylor again, that name cut deeper each time." When they finally left for lunch, I stepped outside. The morning breeze was crisp, carrying the scent of pine. From the edge of the porch, I could hear Emma's voice, low but firm from the dock. "Yes, the property's incredible. Once we make it official, we'll redo the exterior. Maybe list it as a lakeside resort. Trust me, it'll pay for itself in one season." I froze. The words didn't make sense at first. "Make it official," the other woman. One of the visitors said, "You're lucky your mom's place is in her name only." Clean title, Emma laughed. Not for long. For a moment the world tilted. My knees went weak. They weren't just using my house, they were planning to sell it. My hands shook as I gripped the porch rail. I tried to breathe, but the air felt heavy, too thick to swallow. I forced myself to move quietly back inside, closing the door with care so the hinges wouldn't creak. I leaned against the wood, the words replaying in my head. Not for long. I went to the study and called Liz again. She picked up immediately. "Margaret, I've been looking over those documents. You were right, the signature's forged. But there's more. The event company has an attached addendum about property usage rights. It's buried in fine print, temporary, but it could complicate ownership if anyone tried to claim shared assets. Meaning, I asked. Meaning, she said if someone convinced the right people that you'd consented, they could file for co-ownership or use the event income to argue vested interest. It's a loophole, legal manipulation, but still manipulation." I sank into my chair. "She wouldn't go that far," I whispered, though even as I said it, I didn't believe it. Liz sighed softly on the other end. "Margaret, I know this hurts, but you need to stop thinking like a mother and start thinking like a property owner." Her words hit like cold water. "You need to protect yourself before they file anything permanent. I'll start drafting a notice of ownership confirmation. Just don't let them know you're aware." I thanked her and ended the call, but the silence that followed felt heavier than before. The air inside the cabin seemed to hum with tension. Every sound amplified the ticking clock, the faint creak of the wood, the distant laughter outside. I looked at the family photos stacked in a box, the ones Emma had moved for the decor. I reached in and pulled one out, a picture from her college graduation. She stood in her cap and gown, arms around me, smiling wide. I remembered the heat of that day, the pride swelling in my chest as I told her, "You can be anything if you stay honest." I'd meant it, but honesty, it seemed, had an expiration date. By noon, the group from the dock came back inside, bringing the scent of lake water and champagne. Mom Emma called her voice bright and effortless. "We're having a few friends over tonight, just a small gathering before the rehearsal dinner. Hope that's okay." I turned from the kitchen sink, smiling the kind of smile that hides everything. "Of course, dear. Make yourself at home." She didn't notice the edge in my voice. People rarely do when they assume you're harmless. Later that evening, I stood by the doorway as guests arrived. Laughter, clinking glasses, music, my cabin was glowing with a life that no longer felt like mine. Emma moved gracefully among them, introducing Ryan's business partners, their wives, local investors. I heard phrases like potential property value development rights, waterfront access. My heart thudded louder with each word. I realized this wasn't a party. It was a sales pitch. Around 10, the crowd thinned out. I pretended to tidy up while Emma and Ryan stood near the fireplace, whispering. "We're almost there," she murmured, thinking I couldn't hear. "After the wedding, once Mom signs the transfer for the tax stuff, it'll be ours officially." "And if she doesn't?" Ryan asked. Emma's tone hardened. "She will. I'll make her think it's just paperwork for insurance." The words sliced through me. I stood frozen in the hallway, clutching a glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. My daughter, my only child, was planning to trick me into signing away my home. The girl I'd raised to speak truth, even when it hurt, was now rehearsing deceit like it was a love song. I waited until they went upstairs before I allowed myself to move. I poured the untouched wine down the sink, watching the red swirl down the drain like spilled blood. I turned off the lights one by one, each click echoing in the hollow quiet. When I reached the porch, the night air hit my face, cool and sharp. Across the lake, a single lantern flickered on a boat, lonely and distant. I sat in the dark and whispered to the reflection in the glass door, "You wanted me quiet, Emma. You wanted me small, but you've forgotten. Silence doesn't mean surrender. If you were me, would you confront your child tonight, or would you let her walk straight into the trap? She's built comment 1. If you'd confront her now, or hit, like if you'd wait. Because I decided to wait and to make sure when the reckoning came there would be witnesses." By the third day, my home no longer smelled like cedar and rain. It smelled like perfume hairspray and the synthetic sweetness of cheap candles pretending to be luxury. Every surface was covered flowers, champagne flutes, camera equipment, makeup kits. The cabin that had once felt like my sanctuary now looked like a stranger's showroom. I walked barefoot across the hardwood floor, the sound of laughter drifting from every corner, and realized I had nowhere to sit that still felt like mine. Mrs. Walker, one of the decorators, called as I passed the living room. "Could you move your things out of the downstairs closet? We're using it for bridesmaid storage. My things, my coats, my husband's fishing gear, the old quilt I'd made from his shirts were now an inconvenience." I nodded, pretending to be agreeable. "Of course," I said softly. "Wouldn't want to be in the way." Upstairs, I folded the quilt and sat on the edge of the bed that had been my refuge these past months. Through the thin walls, I could hear Emma laughing with her bridesmaids. Her laughter used to be my favorite sound, bright, full of life. Now it felt like an echo of something lost. Every joke she made downstairs was another nail sealing me out of my own life. At noon, I came down to find a catering truck parked on the lawn. 3 men were unloading crates of wine and boxes of food. A young woman with a clipboard pointed at the kitchen. "Set up here. We'll need counter space for the hors d'oeuvres prep." When she saw me, she smiled politely. "Oh, you must be Mrs. Taylor's mother. We'll try to stay out of your way." Her tone was kind but dismissive, the way people talk to someone whose opinions no longer matter. Emma entered moments later wearing a silk robe embroidered with bride and gold letters. "Mom?" "There you are. I was wondering if you could help with something." I waited, though I already knew this wouldn't be a request. It would be an order wrapped in sweetness. "Can you move upstairs for the next couple of days? The makeup team needs the master bedroom for lighting, and the photographer says the upstairs room has a great view for your morning coffee. You'll love it." She said it with a grin so bright it almost hid the cruelty underneath. "The master bedroom," I repeated quietly. "The one I sleep in." She nodded. "Just until after the wedding. You don't mind, right?" There it was again, "you don't mind," the phrase she'd used her whole life to make me complicit in my own discomfort. I smiled faintly. "Of course, sweetheart, I wouldn't want to disturb your big day." By the time evening fell, my things had been packed into boxes and moved to the tiny guest room upstairs. My husband's chair, which had always faced the lake, was gone for better staging, the decorator had said. I went looking for it and found it in the garage, under a tarp surrounded by toolboxes and cables. For a long time, I just stood there, staring at it. I remembered the nights he'd sit there, reading his glasses slipping down his nose, the way he'd look up and smile when I laughed at something trivial. That chair had been the last piece of him I had left. Now it was hidden away like an embarrassment. Later that night, I went down to the kitchen for a glass of water. The caterers had finished for the day, and the house was finally quiet almost. From the porch, I heard Ryan's voice, low and sharp. "You think she suspects anything?" Emma laughed softly. "Mom, please. She's just lonely. This place keeps her busy. Once the wedding's done and the paperwork's signed, we'll give her a nice apartment in the city. She'll have neighbors people her age. It'll be better for her." Ryan chuckled. "You make it sound like she's a charity project. Well, she said she kind of is." I stood in the shadows, gripping the kitchen counter to steady myself. A charity project. I felt something in me break something small but essential. Not anger, not yet. Just a quiet, hollow grief. The kind that doesn't burn, only freezes. When I finally went upstairs, I sat on the floor by the window. The lake was silver under the moon, its calmness almost cruel. I thought about the years I'd spent building a life from nothing, the long nights grading papers, the summers I'd worked double shifts so Emma could go to summer camps, the holidays I'd spent alone so she could travel with friends. I'd done it all willingly, joyfully even, because I believed that someday she would understand sacrifice, that she would remember who built the foundation she now walked on. But she hadn't. The next morning, the house buzzed again. The florist arrived, filling the rooms with roses and lilies. "Where do these go?" a worker asked. Emma waved vaguely toward the hallway. "Anywhere. Just make it look expensive." She glanced at me. "Mom, can you make sure no one comes upstairs today? The stylist needs quiet while I get my hair trial done. So I sat alone in the guest room listening to laughter rise and fall below me. Every sound was a reminder that I had become invisible in my own story. By afternoon, I went to the window and watched the team install a floral arch at the edge of the dock. It was beautiful, painfully so. And for a brief moment, I almost felt proud. Until I noticed something else. My mother's antique vase, the one that had survived 3 generations sitting on a table outside holding roses. A piece of family history being used as decoration for a wedding I hadn't agreed to host. I went downstairs and picked it up carefully. "Be careful with that," Emma said sharply, walking over in her robe. "It's perfect for the centerpiece." "It's not decor," I said softly. "It's an heirloom, my mother's." She sighed. "Mom, please, don't start. It's just for one day." I looked her in the eyes and asked quietly, "Is there anything in this house that still belongs to me for more than one day?" For the first time, she hesitated, but then she smiled that practiced distant smile. "Don't be dramatic." That night, I lay awake again, the laughter fading into silence as everyone went to bed. The moonlight pooled across the floor, cold and uninviting. I felt small, smaller than I had ever felt in my life, but beneath that shrinking sense of loss, something new began to take shape. A pulse, steady and deliberate. I thought of Liz's words, "Stop thinking like a mother, start thinking like a property owner." Downstairs, I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator and the creak of the floorboards where my husband's chair used to sit. I whispered into the darkness, "They've taken everything but my will." I closed my eyes and breathed in the silence that used to be mine, knowing it wouldn't stay quiet for long. Because once a teacher learns the full lesson of betrayal, she doesn't stay a victim. She rewrites the ending. If you're listening, tell me how much humiliation would you endure before you finally stood up, comment 1, if you'd stop it now. Like if you'd wait until every witness was watching. Because I decided to wait until the moment they thought they'd won. That's when I'd remind them whose name was still on the deed. The day the in-laws arrived, the air itself seemed to tighten around the house. By sunrise, the quiet mist that used to drift over the lake was replaced by the heavy thrum of engines' laughter and luggage wheels scraping against the stone path. From my upstairs window, I watched a convoy of luxury cars pull into the driveway. The Taylors Ryan's family had come in full force. I'd never met them before, but I didn't need introductions. The way they stepped out, sunglasses gleaming, designer coats flapping in the wind, told me everything. They were people used to taking up space. My space. I took a deep breath and went downstairs to greet them. The moment I opened the door, the first thing that hit me wasn't their perfume or their smiles. It was the assumption. "You must be the caretaker," Mrs. Taylor said, brightly, glancing past me into the living room. "Everything looks charming, so rustic." She walked straight in without waiting for me to answer. Behind her, her husband was already on his phone, barking instructions at someone about deliveries. "The bride's mother is upstairs, right?" she asked absently. "No," I said. "I'm the bride's mother." She froze just for a second before pasting on a brittle smile. "Oh, of course you are. Forgive me, I didn't realize. You don't fit the picture Emma described." I didn't ask what picture that was. I didn't want to know. By noon, the entire house had transformed again, new people, new voices, new demands. Mrs. Taylor took over my kitchen like a general occupying enemy territory. "This fridge is too small," she complained. "Where will we keep the seafood? And the wine? Oh, we'll have to bring in another cooler." When I tried to explain that the lake's temperature could keep the drinks cold if she wanted, she waved a manicured hand. "Oh, no, dear, we'll handle it. You just rest." The way she said rest sounded like an insult. I stood in my own home, surrounded by strangers giving orders, and felt the familiar pressure in my chest, that mixture of rage and heartbreak that builds quietly layer by layer until it becomes something solid. I went to the back deck to breathe. From there I could see Emma in the garden, with the florist giving instructions with an authority that didn't belong to her. "No move the arch 2 feet left. The reflection on the lake is better that way," she said, pointing. Her voice carried the same tone her father used to use when he thought I wasn't doing enough. The realization made me sick. Inside, the Taylors had gathered around my dining table, my husband's table, sipping wine and talking about the house as if it were a property listing. Such potential, Mr. Taylor said. With the right renovations, this could easily double in value. Lake access alone could fetch a fortune. Oh, Emma told us she's planning to modernize it once it's officially theirs, Mrs. Taylor added casually. It'll be a wonderful investment for them. Officially theirs. The words hung in the air like a curse. I stood in the doorway, invisible, my pulse hammering in my ears. I wanted to speak, to scream, to reclaim the air they were stealing from me, but something deeper kept me still. I realized that if I shouted now, I'd only be confirming their story. The fragile, unreasonable old woman who couldn't let go. No, not yet. That evening, as twilight wrapped itself around the lake, Emma came upstairs with a soft knock on my door. She didn't wait for me to answer before stepping inside. Mom, I hope today wasn't too chaotic. The Taylors can be a lot. She laughed lightly. But they're family now. You'll get used to it. I thought I already had a family, I said, my voice calm. Apparently, I was mistaken. She sighed, brushing imaginary dust from her dress. Mom, please don't be difficult. You know how important this weekend is for me. For us. Can't you just be happy? Happy, I echoed. You forged my name, moved strangers into my home, and let people treat me like hired help. Is that what happiness looks like now? Her eyes narrowed slightly, that subtle shift from guilt to defense. You're overreacting. You've always had a flair for drama. We're just trying to celebrate, and you're making it about yourself. About myself, I whispered. Emma, this is my house. She rolled her eyes, for now. The words landed like a slap, sharper than any raised hand. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. She must have sensed the effect because her tone softened. Look, Mom, I'm just saying, it's a big place. You don't need all this space at your age. After the wedding, Ryan and I can help you find something smaller, cozier. Somewhere you'll have company people your age. You'll thank me later. That was when I understood. This wasn't about a wedding. It was about erasing me piece by piece until I was no longer an obstacle. They didn't just want my house. They wanted my silence. After she left, I sat by the window for a long time. Outside, the garden lights glittered against the dark water, casting ghostly reflections. Laughter floated up from below, the kind that sounded too loud, too forced. I thought of my husband again, of how we'd built this life together from nothing. The nights we'd planned our retirement, the lists we'd made of places to travel, the dreams we'd tucked away for later. But later had come, and he was gone, and now even the home we'd built was being stolen under the guise of love. I went to the closet and opened an old box, the one I hadn't touched since his funeral. Inside were letters, photographs, and a folded document, the deed to the house. His signature beside mine, faded but firm. I ran my fingers over the paper the way you touch a memory that still hurts. I whispered, "You built this for me, didn't you? So I'd never have to depend on anyone." Downstairs, the music started again. Soft jazz this time, elegant, expensive. I stood there holding the deed, the laughter bleeding through the floorboards, and felt something inside me finally shift. The grief, the humiliation, the exhaustion, all of it condensed into one sharp, perfect point. Clarity. I picked up my phone and sent a message to Liz. "It's time. I want to move forward, quietly." Within seconds, she replied, "I'll handle everything. Just act normal. Let them think they've won." I placed the deed back in its envelope and smiled for the first time in days. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind that comes when pain finally hardens into purpose. I turned off the light, lay back on the bed, and stared at the ceiling. Below me, the sounds of their laughter continued, careless and hollow. They think they've taken everything I whispered to the dark, but they've forgotten one thing. I still know how to fight, and this time I'm not teaching anyone the rules. If you're still listening, tell me, what would you do if your own child planned to erase you from your own home? Comment 1, if you'd fight for every inch, like if you'd walk away and make them regret it from afar. Because I wasn't going anywhere. The storm was coming, and I was already standing in the eye of it. I woke up before dawn the next morning, long before the noise began. The lake was still a sheet of glass tinted with silver, the kind of calm that makes people believe peace is permanent. I knew better. Peace only lasts until someone mistakes it for weakness. I made myself coffee, black and strong, and sat at the kitchen table surrounded by the faint ghost of last night's laughter. My daughter's perfume still hung in the air, sweet and cloying like the aftertaste of betrayal. I didn't cry. I'd already done that. The tears had dried somewhere between humiliation and realization. What replaced them was something colder, clearer. I'd spent my entire life teaching others how to think critically, how to see patterns, how to understand cause and consequence. It was time to apply my own lessons. At 7, I called Liz. She answered on the first ring. "Morning, Margaret. You sure about this?" I looked out the window at the dock where the floral arch now stood a perfect picture of deceit. "Completely," I said. "Let's start." "Good," she replied. "I'll file the ownership confirmation today. It'll quietly freeze any property transfer. You'll stay listed as the sole legal owner. In parallel, I want you to gather proof, anything that shows they've been using your property without consent. Photos, recordings, contracts, receipts. If they've been careless, that'll be our ammunition." "I'll handle it," I said. "And Margaret," she added softly, "don't let them see the shift. Keep playing the part. The more they underestimate you, the easier this will be." After the call, I dressed deliberately. Simple jeans, a gray sweater, nothing threatening. I looked like any aging mother trying to be helpful. When I stepped outside, Emma was already at the dock directing the catering crew. "Mom, you're up early," she said brightly. "We have a million things to finish today." "I figured," I said with a small smile. "Anything you need me to do?" Her shoulders relaxed instantly. "Yes, can you handle the florist when she gets here? Make sure she arranges everything around the gazebo. Oh, and the event manager might stop by to confirm details. You can sign for me if anything needs approval. It's all in your name anyway." She laughed, completely unaware of what she'd just admitted. I kept my expression neutral. "Of course, dear, I'll take care of it." When the event manager arrived, a young woman with a tablet and a polite smile, I welcomed her in. "Good morning, Mrs. Walker. Just here to finalize the guest logistics. We received the final payment from your daughter yesterday." "Ah," I said lightly, "you mean Emma." "Yes, she mentioned you'd be handling the rest." The woman handed me the contract for the event neatly printed and signed. "This copy's for you." I thanked her, and after she left, I sat at the table with the papers spread before me. The document was a goldmine. Emma's email address, her digital signature, and attached payment confirmations all under my name. She hadn't even bothered to hide the trail. It was arrogance disguised as efficiency. That afternoon, I started collecting quietly. Photos of every invoice left on the counter, screenshots of emails, even voice memos of her conversations with vendors. Each piece went into a hidden folder on my laptop labeled recipes, because I knew Emma never cared to look there. At dusk, I called Liz again. I have everything I told her. Payment receipts, signatures, and the event company's acknowledgement that they dealt with Emma using my identity. "Perfect," Liz said. "I'll loop in a colleague who specializes in contract fraud, discreetly. Also, I'll need your authorization to contact the county records office." "You have it," I said. "And Liz, thank you." "For what?" "For believing me without hesitation." There was a pause. That's what happens when someone knows who you used to be, Margaret. Everyone else forgot that you were never soft. They mistake kindness for surrender. After the call, I sat by the lake, the cold wind tugging at my hair. The moon's reflection trembled on the surface, fractured by the ripples from the dock. Behind me, I heard laughter again. Emma Ryan and the Taylors rehearsing speeches, discussing the perfect angles for the wedding photos. Every laugh was a reminder of how far she'd strayed. Mom, Emma called from the deck. "You're not freezing out there, are you?" I turned to her, smiling faintly. "No, dear. I'm just thinking about how beautiful everything looks." She beamed, misreading the meaning completely. "I knew you'd come around. I told Ryan you'd understand once you saw how perfect it all is." "Perfect," I repeated, turning back to the lake. "Yes, that's one word for it." That night, I began writing everything down. Every conversation, every detail, every act of deceit. Years of teaching had trained me to document precisely. If Emma thought she was orchestrating a fairy tale, she didn't realize I was already writing the ending. The next morning, Liz sent me an encrypted email. Attached was a legal notice confirming that all financial and property authority under my name had been reaffirmed and locked. No sales transfers or co-ownership claims could proceed without my explicit consent. Stage 1, complete her message read. I smiled, sipping my coffee. The house was buzzing again with noise music, chatter orders, but for the first time in days I felt steady. They could keep decorating, laughing, playing house. They didn't know that every nail they hammered into my floor was another piece of evidence sealing their own downfall. Later that afternoon, the wedding photographer came by for pre-event shots. I pretended to help, guiding them to the best angles, offering lemonade, smiling like a doting mother. "You must be so proud," the photographer said. "I am," I replied. "My daughter worked very hard for this moment," then I added quietly, "Every action deserves its consequence. Don't you agree?" He laughed, uncertain, assuming it was a joke. But I wasn't joking. That night, when the last car left and silence settled once more, I walked through each room of my cabin. The decorations glowed softly under the string lights. My mother's vase gleamed on the table. My husband's chair was still under the tarp in the garage, waiting. Everything they'd taken now had a purpose. Each insult had become kindling. I looked around and whispered, "Let them think this is their story. Tomorrow we'll start mine. If you're still listening, tell me, would you have done the same? Would you play along? Smile and gather proof until the truth was undeniable. Comment 1, if you'd fight back in silence, like if you'd rather walk away. Because sometimes the most powerful move isn't shouting, it's watching them hand you the evidence you need." The night before the wedding, the lake was restless. The wind came in soft bursts that rattled the windows and stirred the curtains like whispers of warning. Downstairs, the house was alive with movement, footsteps, laughter, the hum of final preparations. I moved through it quietly, unnoticed, like a ghost haunting what was once her home. Every light was on every corner, filled with strangers. I could hear Emma's voice floating from the master bedroom, my bedroom where she and her friends were doing last-minute fittings. When the laughter died down, I stood outside the door for a long time listening. The sound of zippers, the rustle of fabric, muffled voices. "You're going to look perfect tomorrow," someone said. Emma giggled. "Perfect's the least I deserve after the year I've had." They didn't know I was there. I should have walked away, but something stronger than pride held me in place. I turned the knob and stepped inside. The room was glowing with soft white light from the vanity mirror. My wedding gown, the one I had worn 40 years ago, carefully preserved in its box, was hanging from the closet door, lace yellowed by time. I stopped breathing. What is that doing here? My voice was calm, but the edges were sharp. Emma turned startled. "Mom, you scared me." She glanced at the dress. "Oh, that I found it while we were clearing out space for the makeup team. Isn't it beautiful? I thought it would make a lovely photo prop." "A prop," I repeated. "That dress belonged to your grandmother before it belonged to me. It's not a decoration." Emma sighed, brushing a curl from her face. "Mom, please. You can't keep everything sacred forever. It's just fabric. Memories fade. What matters is the image, the story people see. Tomorrow's going to be huge. Everyone will be watching." Her words struck me harder than she knew. The story people see. That was all this had become, a show for the outside world, a performance of love built on deceit. I walked toward the window, the one that looked out over the lake, the same view I'd watched every morning since I'd moved here. The moon's reflection trembled on the water, like an old truth waiting to surface. "You've changed," I said softly. Emma laughed lightly. "I've grown up. There's a difference." "No," I said, turning to her. "You've learned how to take, not how to build." She frowned, crossing her arms. "You're being dramatic again. You always do this. I just wanted to have a nice wedding, Mom. You could have helped instead of judging." "I did help," I said, my voice rising for the first time. "I helped you become the woman who thought she could take what wasn't hers. I helped you believe kindness meant compliance. That love meant silence." Emma's eyes flashed. "Why are you trying to ruin this for me?" "Ruin it," I took a step closer. "You forged my name. You used my money. You humiliated me in my own home. And you call me dramatic." Her expression hardened. "You're overreacting. It's just a house, Mom. You live here alone. You can't even climb the stairs without getting tired." I felt the sting, but I didn't flinch. "You know, when your father died, I promised him I'd never let you forget your worth. I see now that I failed. You've mistaken greed for ambition and cruelty for strength. She looked away, her tone softening but her words still cutting. "Mom, I didn't mean to hurt you. I want a life that feels bigger than yours ever was." For a moment, the air between us went still. I really saw her, not as the woman she'd become, but as the little girl who used to stand in front of the mirror, wearing my shoes, pretending to be me. I wanted to reach her, to pull her back, to remind her that love didn't have to look like conquest. But then I remembered every word she'd said about my age, every signature she'd faked, every inch of this house she'd claimed as her own. That girl was gone. I stepped closer, close enough for her to see that whatever softness had lived in me was gone too. "You want something bigger?" I said quietly. "Then tomorrow you'll have it. You'll have an audience, a spectacle, a story people will never forget. You'll get the show you wanted, just not the ending." Her brow furrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, picking up the dress from the hanger, "you're right about one thing. Memories fade, but consequences don't." For a second, neither of us moved. The tension in the air felt electric, fragile. Then I carefully folded the gown back into its box, my movements slow, deliberate. "Good night, Emma." "Mom." "Get some rest," I interrupted, walking toward the door. "You'll need it." Outside the room, I paused in the hallway. Behind the closed door, I could hear her sigh, frustrated but unbothered, already shifting her focus back to the big day. I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes. The faint hum of the lake filled the silence. This was the moment people talk about, the breaking point, the line between what you endure and what you end. I'd crossed it without realizing. My grief had turned into purpose, and my purpose had a plan. I went to the study and turned on the lamp. The folder Liz had sent sat neatly on the desk, the legal notice glowing faintly under the warm light. I traced my name at the bottom of the page, the real one this time, and smiled. "Tomorrow," I whispered to the empty room, "they'll learn the difference between ownership and possession. If you're still listening, tell me, what would you do if the person you loved most looked you in the eye and tried to erase you?" Comment 1. If you'd make them see what they've done, like if you'd let life teach them instead. Because tomorrow I wasn't leaving it to life. I was taking back what was mine. The morning of the wedding broke with the kind of brightness that fools you into thinking the world is kind. The lake glimmered like polished glass, and the cabin, the same home that had once been my refuge, looked like a page torn from a bridal magazine. Rows of white chairs lined the lawn. Musicians tuned their instruments near the dock, and every inch of my garden was buried under roses and silk ribbons. To the guests arriving in their pastel dresses and pressed suits, it was a picture of joy. But I knew better. It was a theater, and every actor was about to meet the truth. I woke early, long before anyone else. I made coffee black and unsweetened the way my husband used to drink it, and sat at the table where his chair once stood. My hands were steady. There was no tremor left, no hesitation. The night had burned all of that out of me. On the counter, a folder waited, Liz's latest delivery, hand-couriered at dawn. Inside were copies of every document, every confirmation, every proof of the lie. At the top lay the notarized notice of ownership, freeze-stamped and sealed. It was my shield and my sword all in one. By the time I dressed, the house was alive again. Laughter upstairs, clinking glasses, photographers shouting instructions. I watched from the doorway as the guests arrived, stepping onto my lawn like it was a movie set. I recognized a few faces from Emma's stories, her boss, her college friends, Ryan's parents, all radiating polite admiration. "The Taylors really outdid themselves," someone whispered. Another replied, "I can't believe this place is theirs." "What a property," I smiled faintly. Not yet, I thought, not ever. At noon, the ceremony began. I stood at the back, half hidden under the shade of a willow tree. The music swelled violins, slicing the air with elegance. Emma appeared at the top of the path in her gown, ivory lace sunlight woven through the fabric. For a moment, even I couldn't deny how beautiful she looked. She was radiant, confident, glowing with the pride of someone who believed she'd won. My heart clenched not with regret, but with something older, quieter grief for the mother who still wanted to be proud of her daughter. The officiant cleared his throat, and the guests turned to face the dock where the couple stood framed by the floral arch I'd watched them build from my window. "Dearly beloved," he began, "we are gathered here to celebrate the union of—" "Excuse me," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Heads turned. The officiant hesitated, blinking. Emma froze, her smile faltering. I stepped forward slowly, each footstep deliberate on the wooden path. The wind caught the hem of my dress and lifted it just enough to make it look like I belonged there, like I was part of the ceremony, not the interruption. Mom Emma's voice was tight, uneasy. "What are you doing?" "I won't take long," I said calmly. "I just thought before vows are exchanged, everyone here deserves to know what kind of love built this day." A murmur rippled through the guests. Ryan frowned. "Mrs. Walker, maybe this isn't—" "Oh, but it is," I said, my tone soft but unyielding. "It's the perfect moment. You see, this wedding, this spectacle was built on someone else's home, on a foundation of lies, forged signatures, and betrayal." Gasps, low whispers. Emma's face drained of color. "Mom, stop it," she hissed. "You're embarrassing yourself." I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. Because according to these, I said, lifting the documents, the only person with any legal right to this property is me. Every contract you used, every payment you made, every fake signature, it's all here. And as of yesterday, this property is under legal freeze. No event sale or transfer can take place without my explicit consent. A stunned silence fell over the crowd. Somewhere in the back, a woman gasped. Ryan's mother's voice cut through the stillness. "Is this true?" Emma stammered. "She's confused. She's old. She doesn't understand." "Old," I echoed, smiling faintly. "Perhaps, but not blind, not deaf, and certainly not foolish." I looked at the guests, each one of them caught between curiosity and discomfort. While my daughter was planning her perfect wedding, she was also planning to take everything I built. She forged my signature, used my bank account, and told people this was her home. She thought age would make me too weak to fight back. Emma's eyes glistened with tears, but there was no apology in them, only fear. "Mom, please, we can talk about this later." "No, Emma," I said. "You wanted an audience. Now you have one." The officiant took a careful step back. Cameras that had been focused on the couple now pointed at me. The irony wasn't lost on me. My humiliation had been public, so my truth would be too. Ryan tried to recover the moment. "Maybe we can— You might want to read this before you continue," I said, handing him a copy of the document. It outlines the penalties for fraudulent use of property, including impersonation of ownership. You can ask your father, since he's an investor, he'll understand the legal language. Mr. Taylor took the paper, scanning it quickly. His face darkened. "Emma, is this real?" She faltered, looking around, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean Mom. I just wanted one perfect day." I felt a surge of something close to pity, but it passed. "You could have had that," I said, softly. "You could have asked, but instead you decided to take." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You've ruined everything." "No, my dear," I said, stepping closer. "I've restored what was already ruined." The silence that followed was heavy. Then, like a crack spreading through glass, whispers started sharp slicing, unstoppable. She forged her mother's signature, used her money, on her own wedding day. Emma's shoulders sagged. Ryan turned away, muttering something under his breath. Mrs. Taylor looked mortified, clutching her husband's arm. I could see it in their eyes, the shift, the instant when admiration turns to disgust. I turned toward the guests and spoke one final time. "I wish I could tell you this is a story about revenge, but it isn't. It's about dignity, the kind that can't be bought, borrowed, or inherited. It's the only thing left when love fails and truth finally demands its turn." Then I looked at my daughter. "The house is still yours to visit Emma, but as a guest, nothing more." Without another word, I turned and walked down the aisle, past the shocked faces, past the trembling bride, past the dream they'd built out of deceit. The music hadn't stopped, but it no longer sounded like celebration. It sounded like something breaking. As I reached the edge of the dock, I glanced back once. The guests were scattering, murmuring the Taylors on their phones. Emma collapsed into a chair, her perfect gown spilling around her like the wreckage of an illusion. I looked out at the lake, at the reflection of the house shimmering in the sunlight, and whispered to myself, "Finally peace. If you're still listening, tell me, would you have done the same?" Would you expose the truth even if it meant breaking someone you once loved? Comment 1. If you believe in truth, no matter the cost. Like if you think forgiveness should come first. Because I chose truth, and for the first time it set me free. By the next morning, the lake was no longer calm. It reflected chaos, the twisted remains of tents, scattered petals, and a toppled floral arch half submerged near the dock. The wedding had ended before it began, but the echoes of what happened still floated through the air. I stood on the porch wrapped in a shawl, watching as the last of the catering trucks pulled away, leaving tire tracks in the wet grass. What they didn't know was that this mess wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something far louder than I had ever planned. It started before sunrise. My phone buzzed non-stop calls, messages, unknown numbers. At first I thought they were vendors demanding payment, but when I finally answered one, a nervous voice said, "Mrs. Walker, this is Karen from Channel 8 News. We'd like to confirm the story about a wedding canceled over property fraud. Could we schedule an interview?" I hung up without replying. My heart hammering. Within hours, the story was everywhere. Someone at the wedding had recorded the entire confrontation and posted it online. The video had already reached 500,000 views. The caption read, "Bride's mother shuts down her own daughter's wedding, and her reason will leave you speechless." The comments flooded in like a tide. "That woman is my hero. She raised a thief and still handled it with more grace than I could. Team Mom, dignity matters." There were cruel ones too. "Poor girl, imagine being humiliated by your own mother." "Old people get paranoid about money." But I didn't read those for long. For every stranger who pitied Emma, 10 more understood. The world, it seemed, recognized the difference between revenge and justice. By mid-morning, the driveway filled again, this time with reporters, neighbors, and even a few wedding guests who had come to apologize. Mrs. Taylor never showed her face, but her husband came once briefly. He stood by the gate, shifting uncomfortably. "Mrs. Walker," he said, "I just want you to know that we had no idea about the signatures. Emma assured us she had your blessing. I'm deeply sorry." "I believe you," I said simply, "but you might want to reconsider who you invest in next." He nodded ashamed and left without another word. Not long after, Liz arrived. She parked by the mailbox, stepped out, and gave me a look that blended sympathy with fierce pride. "Well, she said you certainly know how to make an entrance." "I didn't plan the publicity," I said quietly. "No one plans the truth," she replied, handing me a folder. "Here, legal confirmation. The county office processed everything this morning. The house, the land, the account all secured. No contest possible." I opened the folder and traced the embossed seal. For the first time in months, the paper didn't make my hands shake. "Thank you." Liz studied me for a moment. "How are you holding up?" "I'm not sure," I admitted. "Relieved, I suppose. Sad, too." "That's normal," she said. "When you reclaim your life, you have to mourn the version of it you thought you had." We walked to the deck together. The air smelled of rain and wilted roses. Across the lake, a lone photographer lingered, probably trying to catch one last shot of the famous house. Liz chuckled. "You've gone viral, you know. There's talk of a TV segment. They're calling you the Iron Widow." I almost laughed. God forbid. I'm just a tired teacher who ran out of patience. "Don't underestimate what you did," Liz said. "Most people spend their entire lives waiting for someone else to save them. You saved yourself." That night, the local news aired the footage. They blurred Emma's face, but everyone in town knew who she was. The anchor's voice was calm, clinical. In a shocking turn of events, a lakeside wedding was halted when the property owner revealed the event had been planned under forged documents. Sources confirm that law enforcement is now reviewing the case. My phone lit up again, this time messages from former students. "Mrs. Walker, I saw you on the news. You always said integrity is the only exam that never ends. You passed, like always." I sat on the couch, staring at the screen, tears stinging my eyes. Somewhere inside, the teacher in me smiled. 2 days later, Emma showed up. No photographers, no makeup, no entourage. Just her standing on the porch in jeans and a sweatshirt, eyes, red, voice, small. "Mom, can I come in?" I hesitated before opening the door. She looked different, smaller somehow, the shine gone from her. She stepped inside, glancing around at the stripped-down living room. "I didn't know where else to go," she said. "Ryan left. His parents won't talk to me. Everyone's seen the video. I didn't say anything. She sat down at the table where her father's chair used to be. The silence stretched. Then she whispered I was wrong about everything. I wanted to believe her, but the words felt fragile like paper in the rain. "Why, Emma?" I asked softly. "Why did you do it?" Tears slid down her cheeks. "I thought if I had more money, more success, I'd finally feel safe. You always made it look so easy, Mom. You never needed anyone. I wanted that." "It wasn't easy," I said. "It was lonely. But I built my life on honesty, not shortcuts. You can't steal your way to peace." She nodded, crying harder now. "I ruined everything, didn't I?" "No," I said, surprising myself. "You ruined a wedding, that's all. But whether you ruin your life, that's still up to you." She reached for my hand, but I didn't move to take it. "Not yet." "Mom," she whispered, "what happens now?" "Now," I said quietly, "the truth lives on, and you decide if you can live with it." Later, after she left, I stood on the dock watching the water ripple in the fading light. Across the lake, someone shouted my name, my neighbor Maria. She waved from her porch. "We saw the news. Maggie, good for you. You stood your ground." I smiled faintly, lifting my hand in acknowledgement. The world knew now. The story wasn't private anymore. It had spread like fire through town gossip, social media, newsrooms. But this wasn't scandal to me. It was liberation. For the first time in months, I felt air fill my lungs without guilt. If you're still listening, tell me, would you have done the same? Would you let the truth burn through every lie, even if it meant setting fire to your own family? Comment 1 if you believe truth deserves witnesses, like if you'd rather keep your peace quietly. Because when the truth finally found light, it didn't just destroy, it purified. The storm that had swallowed my life finally passed, leaving behind silence, the kind that felt earned, not empty. A week after the wedding, that wasn't the lake returned to its glassy calm. The last petals had washed away, the tents were gone, and the grass, though flattened, was still green. My home looked smaller without the chaos, but in that stillness I could breathe again. I walked barefoot across the porch, the wood warm under the morning sun, and realized something I hadn't felt in months. Peace wasn't something you waited for, it was something you reclaimed. The legal side ended quietly. Liz handled everything with the precision of someone who'd spent her life cutting through lies. She showed up one afternoon with a small smile and a folder under her arm. "It's official," she said. "The investigation's closed. The county sheriff reviewed the evidence and confirmed the fraud. Your ownership is undisputed, and there will be no criminal charges as long as you don't press further." "I'm not interested in revenge," I told her. "Just truth." "That's what makes it powerful," she said, handing me the papers. "You won." The Taylors sold their house in the city and moved away quietly. Their name, once respected in Ryan's corporate circle, became shorthand for scandal. Their silence was its own confession. Ryan's company withdrew their sponsorships. His parents' friends stopped answering calls. They tried to reach me once, asking for a statement to clarify things for the media. I refused. The truth didn't need commentary, it spoke for itself. Emma stopped calling for a while. I told Liz I wasn't sure if that was punishment or relief. "Both," she said. "But sometimes distance is what lets guilt grow into understanding." She was right. 2 months later, a letter arrived. No envelope, no return address, just my name written in handwriting I knew too well. Inside, a single page. "Mom, I know saying sorry isn't enough. I ruined something sacred. I used to think strength meant taking control. I understand now it means admitting when you've lost it. I'm rebuilding slowly. I hope someday you'll forgive me, not for my sake, but for yours. Because you deserve peace, not resentment. Love, Emma." I folded the letter and placed it inside the same box that held the deed and my husband's wedding band. I didn't cry. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't always loud or immediate. Sometimes it was just the choice not to hate anymore. As for me, I started building again. Not a new house, just a new life inside the one I already had. I reopened the cabin not as a home for guests, but as a retreat for women like me, those who had given too much, been silenced too long, and forgotten their worth. Word spread quietly at first, the lake house for renewal. Within months, women started coming, widows, retirees, mothers who'd been left behind. We shared coffee stories and silence that healed. I didn't tell most of them what had happened. They didn't need the details. They could see it in the way I stood in the calm I carried now. They just knew that this place was safe, and that was enough. One afternoon, Maria, my neighbor, stopped by with a pie and a grin. You know, she said, setting it on the counter, the town still talks about you. Half of them call you a legend. The other half call you terrifying. Then I must have done something right, I said, smiling. She laughed. What will you do if Emma comes back? I looked out the window at the lake where sunlight shimmered like forgiveness waiting to happen. If she comes, I said softly, I'll listen. I won't promise anything more than that. Listening's where healing starts. That evening, after Maria left, I sat on the dock with a cup of tea, the water reflecting streaks of gold and pink from the sunset. For the first time, I wasn't haunted by the laughter that used to fill this place. The silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned, like the breath after a long storm. I thought of my husband, of the promises we'd made here. I imagined him sitting beside me, nodding with that quiet pride he used to have when I did something brave. You'd laugh if you saw it, I murmured to the water. Your wife, the viral sensation. The lake didn't answer, but the breeze brushed against my face like approval. The phone buzzed once an email notification. I opened it. A message from one of the women who had visited the retreat. Thank you for reminding me that dignity isn't something others give us. It's something we take back. I smiled and closed the phone. The world outside could spin with noise and gossip and digital applause, but in that moment, I didn't need any of it. All I needed was the gentle ripple of the lake, the steady rhythm of my own breath, and the certainty that I had survived being erased. If you're listening, tell me, what does peace look like to you? Comment 1. If you believe peace comes after justice, like if you think forgiveness must come first. Because for me, peace wasn't the absence of conflict, it was the presence of truth. It was late autumn when Emma returned for the last time. The leaves around the lake had turned to fire, and the air carried the sharp scent of wood smoke and rain. The cabin looked almost new again, stripped of its scars, rebuilt with quiet love. I was standing on the porch, sanding a wooden chair for the retreat, when I heard tires crunch on the gravel. I didn't have to look up to know it was her. Some things, even after everything, you still feel before you see. She stepped out of her car slowly, like someone afraid to wake a sleeping ghost. No makeup this time, no expensive perfume. Just a plain sweater, jeans, and the faint weariness of someone who'd been carrying regret too long. Hi, Mom, she said, her voice tentative. Hi, Emma. I set the sandpaper down, wiped my hands on my apron, and gestured toward the lake. You picked a good day to visit. The water's calm today. She followed me down to the dock. The wind tugged at her hair, and I noticed for the first time how much older she looked. Not in years, but in the way guilt ages a person from the inside. We sat on the edge of the dock legs, dangling above the mirror of the water, just as we used to when she was a child. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Only the sound of the waves and the occasional cry of a bird crossed the distance between us. Finally, she said, I saw the retreat online. The women you're helping, they talk about you like you're some kind of saint. I smiled faintly. Saints don't get angry. Her laugh was soft, almost shy. Then you're better than one. You're honest. We fell quiet again. I could feel the tension building in her, the words she'd come here to say. She looked down at her hands. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't about deserving, I said. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of what can't be changed. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I kept thinking I could fix it, make people forget, but every time someone looked at me, I saw what I'd done reflected back. I wanted to come sooner, but I didn't know what to say. Sometimes silence says more than words ever could, I said quietly. And sometimes saying sorry is just the beginning, not the end. Emma turned to me. Have you ever hated me? I took a long breath. The question hung heavy between us, honest and sharp. No, I said finally. I hated what you did, but I never hated you. You're my daughter. That's something even betrayal can't erase. I just had to stop loving you in the way that hurt me. She started to cry, then not the loud, dramatic sobs of guilt, but the quiet kind that breaks you from the inside. I let her cry. When she leaned her head on my shoulder, I didn't pull away. We stayed that way until the light began to fade, the lake turning from silver to deep indigo. When she finally spoke again, her voice was small. "Can I help with the retreat?" Even just small things, cleaning, organizing, anything. I looked at her for a long moment before answering. "You can start by helping me sand this chair," I said. "Peace needs maintenance." She smiled through her tears. Deal. We walked back to the porch together. I handed her a piece of sandpaper, and for the next hour we worked in silence, the rhythmic motion of our hands blending with the sound of the wind. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something real, something beginning. As the sun sank behind the trees, the lake turned to molten gold. I stood and looked out at it, the light spilling across the water like a promise kept. I thought of all the women who had come here, seeking healing, all the stories whispered across this porch, all the pain that had found a place to rest. I realized then that the lake wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to everyone who'd ever lost themselves and clawed their way back. It was a mirror that didn't lie, a reminder that dignity once reclaimed never leaves you again. Emma finished sanding the chair and placed it beside the others. "Looks good," she said. I nodded. "It'll hold." She hesitated, then whispered, "So will we." I turned to her, meeting her eyes, the same eyes that had once looked at me with defiance, now filled with something softer. Maybe I said, "If we keep choosing honesty over pride." The wind rose gently, carrying the smell of rain. Somewhere across the lake, a church bell rang, distant, steady, marking the hour. I watched Emma walk toward her car, then stop and glance back. For a heartbeat, she smiled, and it wasn't the polished smile from her wedding photos. It was small, imperfect, real. Then she drove away, leaving only the sound of tires fading down the road. I stayed on the dock until the stars appeared. The water was dark now, reflecting 1,000 points of light. For the first time in a long while, I felt my life settle into place, not perfect, not repaired, but whole. If you're still listening, remember this peace doesn't arrive with silence. It arrives when you stop apologizing for protecting your dignity. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is walk away from love that asks them to disappear. So tell me, what would you have done? Would you have forgiven or simply let go? Comment 1 if you believe forgiveness is strength. Like if you think freedom comes from walking away, because I chose both. And that choice, quiet, steady, and mine, was the most powerful thing I ever did.